for a night of dinner, dancing, skits, and reminiscing. It's been 40 years since graduation, so take advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime chance to relive the memories. There's also a memorial mass on Friday, the 25th, at the Santa Teresita Church. Be there at 5:30 for candle placement in honor of classmates who've gone before. Tickets for the reunion on the 27th are on sale for $40 a person. For details, find Connie Kittiwas and Nicholas at 488-6108 or Kathy Diaz, 777-3243. Beat us, 79ers.
Looking for a great deal on a new Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, or Ram? Then get to Cars Plus in Mighty now for our spring sales event, like a new Jeep Compass Sport, $166 per paycheck, or a new Chrysler Pacifica LX, $220 per paycheck, or save $8,500 on a new Ram 1500. How about a new Jeep Wrangler Sport, only $274 per paycheck? Low 1.99% financing is available on approved credit. Save thousands during our spring sales event going on now at Cars Plus in Mighty. Cars Plus, driven by you.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Yep. Have you ever heard me say that before, Real Joe Cruz?
Maybe once or twice, sir.
Yeah, it's kind of habitual that we start the program off with that. A couple of really good reasons. One, so I got to have something that I won't forget. And second, because it's quite important. And third, because it gives me a chance to pick on Mr. Justice Antonin Scalia. And fourth, because the left wants to take it away from us. And we see one of our functions here on Tall Tales, we meaning me. Got to get straight on my pronouns here. We, you could use we in a couple of situations. You can refer to yourself as we if you are using the so-called editorial we. So the folks that do the writing for Zemi Ikotmi can refer to themselves as we when they're stating the editorial policy of their newspapers. Zan anay mapotgi. Sino no usa I palabran we, right? And I know I'm going to get in trouble here, but I guess if we were talking in terms of what used to be called Siamese twins, but are now referred to as conjoined twins, it might be appropriate. So I think society has made a big enough mess out of the words he and she and they that I'm not going to contribute to that, so I won't refer to the legendary host of Tall Tales, me, as in the first person plural. I won't refer to what is done on Tall Tales as a product of we, unless it's something that the real Joe Cruz and I are collaborating on, and those things do happen. We have the Scamby quiz every day. The real Joe Cruz introduces Zemi Ikotmi. Sometimes he's the straight man for some of my jokes. He's usually pretty good at chuckling at my feeble attempts at humor. So I guess in those contexts I could use the word we. Now today I've got, as is the usual custom here, I've got a little tidbit about the Second Amendment that I will share with our international radio listening audience. And by the way, I haven't been saying this much since I came back, but if you want to be a part of our international, if you want to be heard by our international radio listening audience, give us a buzz here at 888-8255, 888-TALK. And you can become a part of of Tall Tales yourself. It would be very good for your career and your standing in the community. To be mentioned on Tall Tales is good. To actually speak on Tall Tales is even better. So here's this little squib that I picked up here. Democrats point to student gun control activists as a reason to lower voting age to 16. You remember when there was that shooting that occurred at a high school in Parkland, Florida? A couple of young folks, one of whom that stuck in my mind was a kid named David Hogg, who became instant celebrities with the backing of several adult liberal organizations. And they came out and were very vociferous in their call-outs for gun control. So that's what this story is about. This is a story that appeared in the website that I go to for my Second Amendment stories, CNS News. Well, actually, this one came from CNSnews.com. H.R. 1, a massive voting rights, election security, campaign finance, ethics bill now making its way through the House of Representatives would make, quote, significant changes to the operation of federal elections by states. Now, a pause here, and again for clarification, we use the term federal elections a little bit loosely because elections are conducted by state governments. The typical state model is that there is a Secretary of State who has an overall supervisory role. The actual polling places are conducted by cities, towns, counties, etc. And the purpose of these polling places is to elect state representatives to what has now become our national government. We all know that a state has at least one member of the House of Representatives and 2 senators. So when we talk about federal elections, it's a little bit misleading because what we're talking about here is electing representatives of the various states. The bill does not allow, as you were, significant changes to the operation of federal elections by the states, according to a summary prepared by the Congressional Budget Office. The bill does not allow 16-year-olds to vote, but Democrats are offering amendments that would do just that. Now, can you imagine that the next time we vote, if you were 16 years old, you could go down and vote? It's right now, one must be 18 years old in order to vote, pursuant to one of the amendments to the Constitution. Before that, in many, but not all of the states, one had to be 21 in order to vote. In my own case, the first time I voted was 1960. At that time, a person had to be 21 years old to vote. I did, and I really screwed it up because I voted for John F. Kennedy. I'll never make that mistake again, that's for sure. But then during the height of the Vietnam War, we got into this mindset. Well, by gosh, if those kids are old enough to fight, they're old enough to vote. And if they're old enough to fight, they're old enough to drink. So an awful lot of the states lowered the legal age for drinking alcohol to 18. And a congressional statute lowered the voting age to 18, was quickly declared unconstitutional because such things are creatures of the Constitution. A constitutional amendment then came along, which reads, this is the 26th Amendment, the right of citizens of the United States who are 18 years of age or older to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of age. So this gets into a little bit about what I was talking about. The Constitution does not create a right to vote. It just says that if there is a right to vote, it can't be denied for certain reasons. Age, sex, previous condition of servitude, race, etc. So this is what the 26th Amendment said. And the 26th Amendment wrote in on that feeling that, well, if they're old enough to fight, they're old enough to vote. And I see the logic in that position. I don't know that I'm convinced of the practicality of that position. I probably would be seen as someone who was in favor of voting restrictions. But I'd like to think that the people who go to the polls to elect those who are going to have some control over my life are intelligent, educated, well-meaning people. And an awful lot of 18-year-olds don't fill that bill. Kind of reminds me of a situation that I had the first time I ran for office. I was at a student forum at Simon Sanchez High School, and the question that was asked at that time, we were talking about raising the drinking age to 21, which ultimately happened, but that was a subject of discussion. So the question that the students asked everybody, what do you think about raising the drinking age to 21? And you saw some real political acrobatics there, because everybody knew what the right answer was, even if they didn't care what the correct answer was. So when it came my turn to answer, I said, yeah, I'm in favor of it. And one of the kids said, why? And I said, easy. I was 18 myself once. So, you know, given my own experience, I know that 18 is not old enough to open the bars to kids. And I'm not so sure that 18 is the time to open the polls to kids. Now, if I'm making sense there with respect to 18, that maybe 18 is not the right time to open the polls, or the right age for to open the polls for voters. And if that's true, then it's true in spades for 16-year-olds. One of the societal norms that we proceed upon is that at certain ages, children are not smart enough to make good judgments. That's why if a 16-year-old enters into a contract, the contract is at least voidable, if not void, because a 16-year-old lacks capacity to contract and to do a lot of other things. So to open the polls to 16-year-olds from the standpoint of good politics, good government, good sense, makes no sense. From the standpoint of pandering to a particular segment of the population, you know, the anti-gunners, I suppose it makes a lot of sense. And of course, you can't discuss that matter without using the dreaded P word, pandering. So once again, the Democrats are pandering to the ultra-left. Let's take the guns away from the people. The heck with the Second Amendment, and let's let 16-year-olds vote. So let me go on with this article. Representative Ayanna Pressley, a Democrat of Massachusetts, and Grace Meng, a Democrat from New York, introduced their amendments Tuesday before the House Rules Committee. Both lawmakers pointed to the activism of young gun control advocates as one of the reasons for lowering the voting age. So one of the reasons is, let's let these kids vote because we know they'll vote the right way, which means they'll vote the way we think the thing should go. A quote, I'm here tonight because across this nation, young people are leading the way, which has been the case for every social movement throughout our history. Oh, I didn't know that. Representative Pressley told the Rules Committee, young folks, I guess, like that kid Benjamin Franklin, and that callow youth George Washington, and that whippersnapper known as Thomas Paine, youth, right? They are, they are organizing and mobilizing and calling us to action, making plain the high stakes the next generation faces, from gun violence to climate change to the future of work to the solvency of Social Security. Pressley pointed out to one of her young constituents, as you were Pressley pointed to one of her young constituents who, quote, has been at the forefront for the march for our lives, to stem the tide of gun violence. It is young people who march, organize, and remind us daily in the halls of this institution what's at stake and just how high these stakes are. Representative Meng, a co-sponsor of Presley's amendment, also pointed to student gun control activists in making her argument for 16-year-olds to vote. It's only right and fair. Now, here's a red flag. When you hear somebody say, oh, it's only fair, grab a hold of your billfold and hang on to it tight. Hang on to your wallet. Because when people base their position on, quote, what's fair, what ordinarily follows is a subjective judgment in favor of their own particular choice as to how a matter should go. A friend of mine, a lawyer who has passed away, may he rest in peace, when he would hear people attempt to make an argument based on what was fair, would point out that a fair is something that agricultural communities hold at the end of every harvest season so that the townsfolk can see the produce and the cattle, et cetera, that were raised. There's usually a carnival in connection with the fair. And that's about as far as you need to go with that word. But here's what the congressman says. It's only right and fair to allow 16 and 17-year-olds a voice in our democracy. Throughout our nation's history, from the Vietnam War era movement that sparked the 26th Amendment to the Parkland students who reignited gun violence prevention movement, the power of youth activism has profoundly impacted social and political movements in the United States. And it's time their vote counts. They've been right out there rabble-rousing right along with the rest of us out there with, you know, Black Lives and Matter, Antifa, the 99%, so they should be able to vote too. Both Presley and Meng argued that the 16-year-olds are permitted to drive cars. As far as I'm concerned, that's probably another mistake. Get jobs and pay taxes, and therefore they should be permitted to vote. Now there's a real logical conclusion. Drive cars, get jobs, pay taxes, therefore should vote. Meng introduced 2 additional amendments to ensure greater cultural competency with respect to poll worker training. Here are some other warning signals. Ensure greater cultural competency. The first of these 2 amendments would ensure that poll workers' training manuals include strategies to assist voters in culturally competent manners, paying special attention to voters with diverse needs and backgrounds, including voters who have limited English proficiency. In other words, let's pay real attention here to identity politics when we're working at the polls. Meng's other amendment would require a report on what kind of cultural competency training was given to poll workers. Democrats have titled H.R. 1 as the For the People Act of 2019. Speaking broadly, it would erode state control of elections and relax voter registration and voting day procedures. Congressional Republicans have dubbed the bill the Democrat Politician Protection Act. And I think once again, the Republicans called that one exactly right. Let's let anybody who we think will vote Democrat vote, even if they're only 16-year-old kids, if they're saying the right things, if they've drunk the right Kool-Aid. That's all we need. Let's let them vote. So much for the Second Amendment. Let's go from there to, what do we do next, Real Joe Cruz?
Zemi E. Cutney.
Zemi E. Cutney. That's really clever theme music. Do you know where that comes from, Real Joe Cruz?
It comes from the National Meet the Press, sir.
A national TV program called Meet the Press. It's
Yes,
been
sir.
on ever since, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and I suspect that every afternoon at, well, of course, in Eastern Standard Time, it wouldn't be 4 in the afternoon. It would be, what, 2 o'clock in the morning?
I'm sure they're up listening, sir.
Yeah, they probably are, picking up some pointers, you know. Okay, so we slice and dice the editorials from each of the daily newspapers. Sometimes doing that is just a search for a little bit of merit in one of them. Yesterday, the search turned up empty-handed. There wasn't either one of them that was worth the 30 seconds it took to read the editorial. Let's hope it works out better today. So we start out with the Daily News. Here's a real hard-hitting, edgy, tell it like it is editorial. It's titled, "Congratulations to UOG on 51st anniversary of its charter." Yeah, so, you know, this is going to be exciting. So make sure you've got your seatbelts fastened out there in Radio Land. On Tuesday, the University of Guam celebrates Charter Day. This is the 51st anniversary of the university's charter and the 67th anniversary of its founding. We congratulate the university on this milestone, and we thank the men and women who have worked to make the University of Guam an important center of education in the region. Because we have the university, our residents do not have to leave area to continue their studies. That means quality education is accessible to people who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford off-island schools, and working adults can become lifelong learners as they engage in their careers and raise families. Now, here's a little-known fact. If you are a senior citizen, that is, if you are 55 years of age or older, you could go to the University of Guam without having to pay the usual fees. And the same thing goes for GCC. So if you are a senior citizen out there in our international radio listening audience and and you're looking for a little book learning, you might be interested in the university. Even if you aren't a student or alumnus, you have reason to celebrate the University of Guam. Its programs benefit our entire community through research, preservation. Now, I wonder what the university is preserving. Research, preservation, outreach, and workforce education. The theme for Charter Day this year is Parahulu, which means in English, ever upward, which celebrates the university's continued commitment to excellence in academic research and service. And then there's just some data here. It starts at 9 o'clock this morning at the center courtyard, 9 a.m. today. So if you want to be there for the opening ceremony, you're going to have to hurry like heck to make it. Yeah, 9 o'clock this morning. And then there's another timetable here. As I mentioned here, campus tours as well as tours of the Marine Lab. Now, the Marine Lab, just for clarification purposes, you don't have to be a jarhead to go to the Marine Lab. You don't have to have spent a hitch with Uncle Sam's misguided children, also known as the USMC, to have truck with the Marine Lab. In this case, the Marine Lab refers to the ocean. The Marine Lab and a photo exhibit by the Micronesia Area Research Center will also be conducted. So that's the editorial. Once again, what we have here is something that could easily pass as an announcement, you know, as a news story. The university was chartered 51 years ago. It's 67 years old. Here's what's going on. These are the times involved. But somebody decided, let's take that and just recast it a little bit and turn it into today's editorial. I've got my blue pen in my hand, but I don't think I'm going to be able to use it there. I did notice something else on the editorial page, though, in what I call mining. When I look to either of the editorial pages, if I see a letter to the editor or a column or something like that that I think bears comment, I'll pick that up also. And today I'm going to comment on a column by Frank Ishizaki. And Frank Ishizaki's column says, the headline is, Disappointed in legislative initiative to legalize marijuana in Guam. Yeah. So this is about the first time that anybody in the media has come along and spoken out and said, hey, is this really a good idea? Because the bandwagon is going the other way. If you listen to the talking heads, the editorial, oh, hey, great idea, let's legalize cannabis, and we'll make so much money off taxing cannabis that we'll never have another fiscal problem. So it's break time now. I am not going to go outside. No, I'm not going to do. Even if no matter what, I wouldn't do that. So let's take a break, and we'll be right back.
Shrimp and guacamole for Lent at Subway. The all-new shrimp and guacamole combines generous portions of whole shrimp and a spread of guacamole served on freshly baked bread, paired with vegetables cut fresh daily in restaurants and sauces that are sure to excite your taste buds. Hurry in, it's only available for a limited time. Other fresh Lenten flavors include the classic tuna or the mouth-watering greatness of our seafood sensation. Don't forget the Veggie Max, a delicious and tasty vegetarian patty. Visit any of our convenient locations today. At Subway, you make it what you want.
Save big. Save really big when you bundle up your insurance policies with Nanbo Insurance. Insure your home, auto, motorcycle, or business with Nanbo and enjoy great savings, up to 50%. When it comes to insuring your property, no one knows better than the company with over 50 years of service to the community. Don't compromise the things that matter to you most. Call Nanbo today at 477-9754 or visit nanbo.com for more information. Nanbo Insurance, serving you since 1968.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So Ishizaki makes some pretty clear observations. Our community is overrun with drug abuse and crimes committed by drug addicts to get their fixes. It seems like an endless cycle. That's very true. And I've commented on this before. I know that the orthodox cannabissers will say, well, yeah, but that's not people that use cannabis because that just never happens. And that's an interesting theory. But going on to the rest of the column here, Ishizaki says, talking about drug use, addicts, fixes, crimes, etc. Can we solve this scourge of our society? What should we do? Should we increase punishment for drug addicts and traffickers? Might we spend more energy, time, and resources on drug prevention education? Should we work to improve and increase drug abuse treatment programs? Well, I would add to that, when we try to send out the message to people who might be susceptible to using drugs, especially young people, and we say, no, you shouldn't do that. It's not a good thing for you. It's not a good thing for the people that you care about. And it's not a good thing for the island. And then at the same time, we're saying, on the other hand, we want to make marijuana legal. We want to make another drug legal, even though it's against federal law to possess that stuff. It's kind of hypocritical. And kids being what they are, the kids can spot hypocrisy a mile away, and they're saying, yeah, we shouldn't, but it's okay to legalize marijuana. Ishizaki goes on to say, I am saddened by recent legislative initiative to legalize marijuana. There is no shortage of views on the subject. People are divided about recreational legalization versus medical marijuana versus decriminalization of marijuana. Please note that the current law has already decriminalized marijuana. The promise of increased revenue in marijuana tourism may not bring the enormous outcomes which would solve Guam's spending addiction. And of course, when it comes to tourism, we've had no less than the Guam Visitors Bureau come forward and say, don't do it. We have put Guam forward as a family-friendly destination, a good place for people from Japan, Korea, Russia, to come down with their families, their small children, spend some time on the beach, etc. A safe, crime-free destination. That doesn't mix very well with bring your children down here to this family-friendly destination, and while your kids are playing on the beach, you can get high. It doesn't seem to fit together very well. Ishizaki goes on to say, legalization will most likely result in increased marijuana use and will create more problems for our community. Studies show that marijuana poses a greater danger to young people whose brains are still developing. Those people that we want to vote at age 16 whose brains are still developing. It's really more a concern than we condone, it is really more a concern that we condone excesses. Perhaps the greatest threats of drug abuse and addiction is our cavalier attitudes that we have the right to abuse our bodies and the privilege to feel good, and that our rights must not be infringed upon by the government, no matter what the societal cost. This anarchist-like attitude is perhaps why people feel it's okay to steal things from others to gratify their personal desires. Going on, marijuana prohibition is acceptable for many. And then he talks about alcohol, the prohibition of alcohol between 1920 and 1933. And one of the arguments that the pro-cannabis folks makes is, well, you know, prohibition didn't work. So why are we trying it again? Well, and I have run across studies that show that actually prohibition did work. It had several, it had several positive effects. And Ishizaki picks those up. During alcohol prohibition, the consumption of alcohol was actually lower, and the abuse of alcohol increased post-prohibition. Strict laws suppressed alcohol abuse. After the repeal of prohibition, booze consumption increased, as did alcohol-related crimes and fatalities. People don't want to talk about that, but prohibition did have some positive as well as negative effects. He goes on to say, I have been following the reports of a bizarre cocaine drug bust that started along the shores of southern Guam. A group stumbled into good fortune with the discovery of many kilograms of cocaine. As Chamorro fishermen would say, they were sweaty with the unexpected catch. Lucky, Real Joe Cruz. They were walking the beach, came upon great fortune, and gave stuff away. Because they don't sound like sophisticated drug dealers, I hope they will be mildly punished and learn from their irresponsible actions. They had difficulty turning in their good fortune to the authorities, which caused their legal nightmare. The story is almost comical fodder for a movie, and it is. You know, they found this like a 45-pound package of cocaine. It came drifting in from the ocean, and it's an interesting question as to where it came from. And apparently what they decided was, well, we got the cocaine, we're going to make a lot of money because we're going to become drug dealers and we're going to sell it. And it didn't work out very well for them. Drug abuse is a very serious local, national, and international problem. I'd like our senators to improve public policy concerning drug abuse prevention and treatment. Please stop wasting precious legislative time. Let's find solutions for more important problems than marijuana. And is marijuana the problem, or is the attempt to make it a legal substance the problem? Please improve challenges with health, safety, and education. We expect better from you. Well, that's what Frankie Shizaki says, and I can't say that I disagree with much of what he said in his weekly column. Okay, then we come to the Post. Cameras urgently needed at frequent illegal dumping sites. Now, I wonder if someone from Homeland Security helped in the preparation of this column, because it's a masterpiece of reasoning when it comes to catching people doing something wrong. It was an embarrassing sight. A long stretch of dirt path along the fuel pipeline in Datado and nearby areas were littered. I think a stretch is just a stretch. It should be was littered, but maybe it's infected by the use of the word they. Were littered with household junk, including food containers, rusty appliances, car parts, and old plastic toys. Some of our fellow Guamanians discarded the stuff they no longer need along the pipeline when the closest trash transfer station is not that far. The people who left their junk at this perennial illegal dumping place had the transportation to bring this junk to the fuel pipeline in Datado, which is out of sight, but they couldn't take the extra few minutes to bring their trash to the transfer station just a few miles from there and spend a few dollars for the fee to bring their trash to the transfer station in Herman. Amid the shameful sight, on Sunday, there was an inspiration. Then they talk about guardsmen and others going out and picking up the trash, and then going on. Yet despite these efforts, it's just a matter of time before the areas get trashed again. And later, another group of well-meaning island residents will have to get together to clean up after the illegal trash dumpers. We urge the mayor's office, senators and procurement officials to focus their energy on making sure cameras are installed in areas that get trashed every so often. The time the mayors and senators spent on the issue of establishing gambling rules for the Liberation Day Carnival during last Friday's legislative session could have been better spent figuring out the fastest way to get the camera issue done as a deterrent to illegal dumping. For these elected officials, it's really a matter of setting priorities and knowing what's important to the public. Well, I like the way the editorial winds up because, I don't think anybody takes any pride from the fact that if you go into the boonies, and sometimes not even into the boonies, just alongside the road, you see these dumps where people dump their trash. It doesn't do anything for the health, welfare, etc., enjoyment of the island. Certainly doesn't help our tourist industry. And it's something that one of the things that we kind of depend on the government, to deal with. Now, of course, we learned a couple days ago that the mayors can't be bothered with such things. Certainly not mayors Chargaloff and Paco, who kind of are above dealing with people who dump trash in their villages. They made that pretty clear to one of the newspapers. They think it should be somebody else's job. I guess the people that dump the trash feel the same way. So I agree with the editorial here that instead of wasting a lot of time on this bill to give the mayor something that they're not supposed to be doing, that they're not equipped to be doing, and it doesn't fit within the rationale for having mayors, that is to develop rules and regulations for gambling, we'd all be better off if the mayors concentrated on working on the littering and illegal dumping problem. No problem there. Now, here's where I have a little bit of a problem with the editorial. We urge the mayor's office, senators, and procurement officials to focus their energy on making sure cameras are installed in areas that get trashed every so often. So I guess what we could do would be to put an ad in the paper that said, if you dump trash in the boonies, please call this number because we want to find out the sites that you use to dump the trash so that we can install cameras there. Yeah. Or if we went to the areas that have the trash, we mount the cameras and then clean up the trash. And of course, these people that dump the trash come along and see the cameras, they're going to do one of two things: trash the cameras, more likely, or go somewhere else to dump their trash. So I hate to use this analogy again, Real Joe Cruz, but do you remember how I told you how my father suggested that you could catch a robin? I'll repeat it. You know, the kind of the tough part of getting old is you can't remember who you told what stories to. But anyhow, all of my stories bear repeating anyhow, right?
Yes, sir. I remember you speaking about it, but I'm not quite sure how the story went.
Okay. So a robin is a bird that inhabits, it's a migratory bird that comes to the Midwest in the spring. And the sign that spring has finally arrived in Wisconsin, sometimes it's hard to tell, is that somebody sees a robin. And usually the local newspaper will report, so-and-so saw a robin yesterday. And everybody goes, oh, wow, maybe spring is finally going to come, right? So robins are very, very tame birds. And you'll see robins or a pair of robins land in your yard. And if you're a little kid, you can walk up and you can get within like 5 or 6 feet of that robin. And then you'll just fly away. And so, you know, when I was young, I thought, boy, it'd be fun to catch a robin. So I could get maybe even within 4 feet of a robin. But I could never catch the robin because as soon as I got that close, he'd fly away. So one day I asked my dad, Dad, how do you go about catching a robin? I was 4 or 5 at the time. He said, it's really easy, Bobby. All you have to do is put salt on his tail, and then he won't be able to fly. And that's kind of the same reasoning we got here. All you got to do in order to catch the illegal dumpers is put cameras at the dump sites, right? Yeah. Okay, well, yesterday was a scoreless tie because both editorials were so lacking in merit. We had the Good Samaritans and what else did we have yesterday? We had from the Daily News. Oh, yeah, this silly argument about gerrymandering that was so obviously left-wing propaganda that it was meritless. So I don't want to go again with a scoreless tie. I don't want to discourage the editorial writers from even trying anymore. So because it is the least worst, the coveted Blue Star Post, the Guam Post. Now, I should probably take a picture of this, right, and post it on Facebook. All right. So, let's see, we got about 2 more minutes before the break, huh? I saw something in the paper, I think it was the Post today, if I can bear with me for a second to see if I can find it. I took a screen capture of it. Yeah, it is in fact the Post. And this is how it reads. Erratum. Correction. When Guam resident Elmore Cotton, better known as Mo Atgidun, provided testimony during a public hearing on recreational marijuana on Thursday, he said he doesn't use marijuana for cancer relief, but he may use it in the future if it becomes legal. A previous captions information on page 1 of March 8 publication of the Post was in error. Cotton also said he is for, not against, recreational marijuana. So the headline here, instead of erratum, ought to be Atkinson strikes back. And so I don't know if the reason that the Post ran that erratum is because Mo took the considered advice from Tall Tales and actually wrote a note to the Post. Or what I'd really like to think is that those at the Post who monitor Tall Tales are saying, well, we really screwed that up. We better fix it. I don't want to have Tall Tales and Mo Atkinson on my butt. So let's fix that in tomorrow's paper. But in any case, the record was set straight. And as I pointed out to Mo Atkinson yesterday, had he not done this, if this matter had ever come up, if he had ever come up, the Post would have run the wrong information again, because they go to what's called their morgue for their facts. But given this erratum, he has corrected the record for now and for the future. So good job, Mo. Okay, we got a short break here, and then we got about 8 minutes down to the big halftime show we always have at 5 o'clock, 1700.
Attention homeowners, if you don't have a solar energy system on your roof from Micronesia Renewable Energy, now is the time to get one. MRE solar energy systems now come with battery storage for zero money down. This means that your home will have power even when the island power isn't available, like during power outages or during and after storms. The inconvenience of not having power for your home is a thing of the past. Don't be left in the dark. Call 632-2613 for a free consultation. MRE, the smarter choice.
Discover a new Galaxy. GTA introduces the new Samsung Galaxy S10 in 3 different sizes. The Galaxy S10 comes with cool new features like Power Share that allows you the ability to share your battery power with other devices. Or you can capture a wider world with its new camera featuring an ultra-wide lens for when you need to take pictures of the whole family. And with GTA's handset payment option, you can take home a Galaxy S10 for zero down. Come into GTA and bring the Galaxy home.
Okay, so here we are back again on Tall Tales, and I've got a card. A lot of the stuff some of the items on the card have been there for a while, and I just haven't gotten to them, but this is what we're going to talk about this afternoon. We're going to talk about Tello versus the CCU, Rory versus Mike Phillips, or Rory versus our justice system. This also gets into Dan Tydenko, and an item on the card that was previously billed as Mary Torres versus Dan Tydenko. It's all about Rory, the Commercial Port 7, also known as the Magnificent 7, etc., and related subjects, which we've talked about before, but there's still more to be said. And then I've got a couple from national news, like Justice Democrats versus Pelosi, social justice warriors versus non-pretenders, and a Baker versus, quote, they. The Democrats versus the truth, which we talked about yesterday, and the Democrats versus the truth is easily described. The Democrat National Convention will be held in Milwaukee this summer, and the Democrats have announced that they will not allow Fox News to cover their convention. And I suppose that's pretty understandable, because if Fox News covers the Democrat convention, things that the Democrats don't want to be disclosed, like the truth, might come out over the air. So the solution to the problem is just to not let Fox News cover it, which I think probably, from where I sit and the way I see things, is probably good, because it may very well be another example of the Barbara Streisand phenomenon. By barring Fox News from the convention, of course Fox News is going to cover the convention one way or the other, and by barring Fox News from the convention, The net effect may be only to increase the curiosity of the television viewing audience as to what Fox News is saying about that convention instead of what they could pick up on PMSNBC or CBS or some other TV outlet. So that's off. And then I've got an interesting item called Taxation versus Western Union, which came from a column by a gentleman named Bart Stinson, who used to write for the Daily News, used to live here quite a while ago, a pretty interesting guy. I've mentioned him before. He writes for an online newspaper back home again in Indiana, Real Joe Cruz. I guess I didn't give you enough warning for that one, but sometimes you use that for bumper music. And Bart Stinson suggests a tax that could potentially raise a fair amount of money. And although I'm not much of a guy for new taxes or raising taxes, this one does bear a little discussion. So stay with us for that item. Starting out with the first item on the card here, when we've got about 3 minutes before that big halftime show that we have every afternoon at 1700. There's a story in the Post called GPA Billing Question, and a headline in KOM, should condos be charged for power as a commercial building? So I don't know how closely you followed this, but there was a public hearing yesterday on Bill 37-35, which I have, and I'm just going to read a portion of the bill here in the few minutes we've got before the halftime show, and then I'll plunge into the heart of the merits of Tello versus the CCU. And this bill would add new language to Title 12 of the Guam Code Annotated, the part that deals with the Public Utilities Commission. And it says the new language, Public Utilities Commission shall develop and establish a residential rate schedule for residential family condominiums, as you were family accommodations, condominiums, and apartments, providing equitable. Now, there's another scary word. When you see the word equitable, hang on to your wallet. That's another one like fair. Equitable, comparable residential rates. And then we have a sentence that wouldn't pass muster with my high school English teacher. Comparable residential rates notwithstanding if the building complex is on a master meter or meters. So you can't run a sentence that says notwithstanding if. You don't follow the word notwithstanding with the word is. Notwithstanding the fact that, perhaps, but anyhow, this is a pretty amateurish piece of work, and I'll explain why. Notwithstanding if the building complex is on a master meter or meters or par with the rate schedule R as is accorded residential dwellings with individual metering. Now, if you can't understand what I just read, it's not because the subject is so complicated, it's because the draftsmanship is so convoluted. So I'm going to come back to this after our big halftime show, and we'll talk about this rather electrifying subject a little bit more.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3. The Speaker says no. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she would not be in favor of impeaching President Trump.
In an interview just released by the Washington Post, she says, quote, impeachment is so divisive to the country that unless there's something so compelling and overwhelming and bipartisan, I don't think we should go down that path because it divides the country. And he's just not worth it.
Fox's Kristen Fisher in Washington, but freshman Michigan Congressman Rashida Tlaib is still planning to introduce articles of impeachment.
Hold impeachment proceedings today. Start them today and hold him accountable to following the United States Constitution.
Later this week, the House will vote on a non-binding resolution urging the publication of the special counsel's report, which is expected out soon. Asking more than $8 billion for a border wall, $750 billion for defense, and cuts in non-defense discretionary spending. The president has prepared his budget request for the next fiscal year. Russell Vogt, the acting director of the Office of Management and Budget, says the cuts are needed.
Congress has been ignoring the president's spending reductions for the last 2 years. It's only now in our third budget that they're willing to have a conversation about the national debt. We've been trying to have it since we got to office.
The chairman of the House Budget Committee says they won't take the president's request seriously when they start work on the budget. Saying the local situation is deteriorating, the U.S. pulling all remaining U.S. personnel out of the U.S. Embassy in Venezuela.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo putting out a tweet late Monday saying this decision reflects the deteriorating situation in Venezuela, saying earlier Monday the country's been crumbling under a political crisis and days of power outages.
Patients awaiting treatment in hospitals are dying. Food is rotting. Telecommunications networks are entirely collapsing.
Embattled Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro says U.S. sabotage caused the outages. Pompeo blames Maduro's incompetence.
Fox's Jill Nato. This is Fox News.
Shrimp and guacamole for Lent at Subway. The all-new shrimp and guacamole combines generous portions of whole shrimp and a spread of guacamole served on freshly baked bread, paired with vegetables cut fresh daily in restaurants and sauces that are sure to excite your taste buds. Hurry in, it's only available for a limited time. Other fresh Lenten flavors include the classic tuna or the mouth-watering greatness of our seafood sensation. Don't forget the Veggie Max, a delicious and tasty vegetarian patty. Visit any of our convenient locations today. At Subway, you make it what you want.
Save big. Save really big when you bundle up your insurance policies with Nanbo Insurance. Insure your home, auto, motorcycle, or business with Nanbo and enjoy great savings, up to 50%. When it comes to insuring your property, no one knows better than the company with over 50 years of service to the community. Don't compromise the things that matter to you most. Call Nanbo today at 477-9754 or visit nanbo.com for more information. Nanbo Insurance, serving you since 1968.
The vice president and a predecessor clash in a heated exchange over foreign policy.
Former Vice President Dick Cheney fears President Trump's foreign policy is more like Barack Obama's than Ronald Reagan's. That's according to a transcript of a private weekend event obtained by the Washington Post. According to the transcript, Cheney said he was troubled by the Trump administration's decision to end joint military exercises with South Korea. Acclaimed Vice President Mike Pence said it would not affect America's readiness. Pence also hit back at Cheney's criticism of the president's hardline stance toward NATO allies, saying he believes it is possible to demand partners pay more to provide for the common defense, while also reaffirming a strong commitment to America's allies. In Washington, Sean Lanchel, Fox News.
Several foreign airlines have grounded their 737 MAX 8 jetliners following Sunday's crash in Ethiopia that killed 157 people. It's the second fatal crash of that aircraft in 6 months. It's Boeing's hottest-selling jetliner. The FAA says it's too soon to order any actions by U.S. airlines. Boeing says it will update the software in those planes. Another vote in Great Britain's Parliament scheduled tonight on Brexit. It's the third in recent months. The Labour Party predicting the vote will fail again. Did you send a congratulatory text? The thing that made phrases like www and .com part of our vocabulary, marking a milestone today.
It was Al Gore who told CNN in the late 1990s.
I took the initiative in creating the internet.
Though it was actually Tim Berners-Lee who in 1989 put his idea to paper, linking information and computers.
You've got mail.
In what would become the World Wide Web, changing the way we buy stuff and how we consume news and entertainment.
We should work to give people the fullest free expression that is possible.
The internet made Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg a billionaire. and changed how most of us, like this woman, talk to each other.
Fox and Jeff Monasso. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Help celebrate Earth Month with 93.3 The Point and the return of the Upcycle Mascot Showdown. Stay tuned for details on the upcoming live event and how you can support your favorite school. The Upcycle Mascot Showdown, brought to you by Lolita Kamet from Remax Diamond Realty, the Agana Shopping Center, Sylvan Learning Center, PBS Guam, and 93.3 The Point.
Discover a new galaxy. GTA introduces the new Samsung Galaxy S10 in 3 different sizes. The Galaxy S10 comes with cool new features like Power Share that allows you the ability to share your battery power with other devices. Or you can capture a wider world with its new camera featuring an ultra-wide lens for when you need to take pictures of the whole family. And with GTA's handset payment option, you can take home a Galaxy S10 for $0 down. Come into GTA and bring the Galaxy home.
The excitement never ends here on Tall Tales. First, it's that dynamic halftime show that we have every day at 5. And we're going to follow that up with what I call the Scamby test, where you're going to see the real Joe Cruz in the role of scholar. I ask him really hard questions, and he comes up with really good answers. As an example, yesterday I said, Real Joe Cruz, how can a man go 8 days without sleeping? And the Real Joe Cruz said, no problem. He sleeps at night.
My brain's still developing.
Okay. All right. Well, I got a few more for you, Real Joe Cruz, and then we're going to be at the end of the quiz.
I'm ready.
This is a math question, Real Joe Cruz.
Okay, I'm good at math.
Do you want to take off your shoes, or no? You don't need to.
I think I can do this, sir.
Okay, I won't use any numbers larger than 10 then. Okay.
Okay.
If you had 3 apples and 4 oranges in one hand, and 4 apples and 3 oranges in the other hand, what would you have, Real Joe Cruz?
Very large hands.
Correct.
Thank you.
If it took 8 men 10 hours to build a wall, how long would it take 4 men to build it, Real Joe Cruz?
No time at all. The wall's already built.
Got a mind like a steel trap. The last question. How can you drop a raw egg onto a concrete floor without cracking it?
I think you could do that any way you want. Concrete floors are very hard to crack, sir.
You couldn't crack it with an egg, huh?
No, sir.
Well, Real Joe Cruz, you've really established yourself as a scholar here, so I'm glad that your uncle sent these questions along here so that I could test your mettle on these things.
Well, I just hope I don't get called by the University of Guam, to maybe be a professor or something like that.
One might have thought that they'd had you come out and give a guest presentation for Charter Day.
That would be nice.
That
Keynote speaker.
Yeah, that would have really increased the participation, wouldn't it? Okay, well, there aren't that many folks here in our international Facebook audience today, but I ought to say something to each of them, I think.
Welcome back.
Geigi si Jack Haddock, Johnny Leknia si Jack Haffetatet Manu How Goats. Or Ike Haffetad Coach Haffetatet Manu How Guam. So Zach Guahu Nai Moleka Tahagu Lo Guam Hekwatu Tungo. And then we've got Lee Stolley. Good afternoon, Senator. And Real Joe. There's more of this cult of personality popping up again, right? I left, when I left on my vacation, it was with a certain amount of trepidation, fearing that when I came back, it would be Tall Tales featuring Real Joe Cruz and his sidekick, Bob. You're developing a lot of personal popularity there, Real Joe Cruz. Okay, then I've got, see, Ishmael Velez is a regular, and Olga Andrade, somebody who I have never seen on Facebook before, and someone I don't look forward to seeing again. Now, here's a Joe Cruz that gave Olga some free advice. Is that another Joe Cruz?
Yeah, I'm sure it was, sir.
It's not the real Joe Cruz.
It couldn't possibly be.
Yeah, it's just another Joe Cruz. Well, this Joe Cruz is right on the ball, I guess. And we have Robert Camacho. At 18 years old, you are considered an adult by most states. That's right. You can drive. You can own a house if you can afford it. You can have a credit card. Same thing. Get a loan, and you can join the military and go to war. I believe they, now, I think when Robert uses the word they, I think he means 18-year-olds. I don't think he's trying to be politically correct here. So I'll recast that. I believe 18-year-olds should have all the rights and privileges like any other adult. Okay. But I would pose this question to Robert. How about 16-year-olds, Robert? Do you think we should accord the same rights and privileges to 16-year-olds? I don't. Okay, and then Prudencio Mano chimes in. Seems Democrats support socialism going into 2020 national election. Good news for Trump. Yeah, I think you got a good point there, Prudencio. Prudencio congratulates the UOG for Charter Day. And then we've got Mo Atgidun. He says, I took your advice and requested a retraction from the Post. Every once in a while, lightning strikes and someone pays attention to these things I say here on Tall Tales. And I've got Rocio Merrill. Hi, Bob. Can we see what Joe Cruz looks like? Sounds like a very smart guy. There we go again. Now, Rocio says Joe Cruz. I guess she's referring to another Joe Cruz, the one who chimed in about the Tupperware. And sorry, Rocio, I can't do that because I don't even know where the another Joe Cruz is. The only Joe Cruz we have here is the real Joe Cruz. And what day was it that you actually had to come in here, real Joe Cruz? My first day back, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, to set up the stacked VIP.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Rocio, he was actually on camera for about 30 seconds. And you kind of missed your chance. I don't want to run the risk of giving him too much camera time.
That's true, sir.
Yeah, because of this rapid development of the cult of personality. I really like Real Joe Cruz Club.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Okay, but good shot. Maybe someday we'll arrange a cameo appearance for the Real Joe Cruz. But the way we're set up here, the cameras don't point to the real Joe Cruz. There's no camera in the control room. The cameras are on the microphones out here in the broadcast booth. So if you are talking into a microphone, a camera will be trained on your face, just as one is trained on my face. But we don't have a camera on the microphone in the control room where the real Joe Cruz pushes the buttons, plays the music, does all this really important stuff. Okay, good question, Rocio. So going back to Tello versus the Public Utilities Commission, The statute, which I just read, said that I mentioned that if you don't completely understand it, it's not because the subject is so complicated, it's because the statutory language is so convoluted and hard to understand. The first paragraph says that the Public Utilities Commission should establish equitable and comparable residential rates for people who live in multifamily accommodations. And then the second paragraph says in the residential rate schedule, the authority, and that would be the authority would be the power authority, shall develop a policy and process to reasonably determine and separate out the estimated residential power consumption for the large multifamily accommodation with a master meter and the separate power consumption and utilization for non-residential components of the facility not normally found in a single or small multifamily accommodation, such as but is not limited to common area pools, elevators, parking and grounds area lighting, etc. Develop a coinciding fee schedule to recover costs for power provided to the aforementioned areas. This wouldn't get you past your teacher in freshman comp. It would come back with a lot of blue pencil marks and a note on the bottom, rewrite, because it's just too hard to understand. Now, to go on with the story a little bit, to actually find out what the bill says, you kind of got to read the news reports. And this is what the Post says. The bill was introduced by Senator Tello Klitzkie, who said the aim of the bill is to apply a fair rate schedule to all families living in apartment buildings, condos, and other multifamily residential buildings. During a hearing on the bill, Klitzkie said more than 600 families are affected. As an example, the senator cited the residential charge for 600 kilowatt hours, which is about $15. The same amount of electricity charged at the commercial rate would be $34.80. Now here is the real explosive part of Tello's argument. For families living paycheck to paycheck, such a difference is quite substantial. This is really important when you're talking about how to draft legislation. Consolidated Commission on Utilities Chairman Joey Duenas, GPA General Manager John Beneventi, Fred Horecki, the Public Utilities Commission's administrative law judge, lined up to oppose the bill. Here we are again, Beneventi said. This is similar to other bills not passed. GPA is under constant review by credit rating agencies, Beneventi said. He added that Bill 37 will, quote, attract negative concerns among rating agencies about legislative interference with GPA's rates. We don't charge based on a term called residential rates, Duenas said. We charge what the building demand puts on the system. Horecki said the PUC is the body that should be addressing all rate matters and that the legislature is essentially ordering GPA to adopt specific rates for specific customers. Back to support. Chris Felix said, I'm not asking anyone to change rates. Chris Felix, the principal broker for Century 21 Realty Management said, I'm just asking if it's residential, bill them at residential rates. I don't think that violates any covenants or bonds. Speaking on behalf of his association of 452 members, Guam Association of Realtors Bobby Sachdej said the bill looks after and protects the rights of those who reside in condominium complexes and apartment complexes that fall into the category of having a large main power meter. KOM also wrote up the same item, the same hearing. Let's see if they covered something that GPA, here's what they say. The bottom line is that all these different entities, all these different people are charged based on what it costs to provide service to that customer, whether it is a house, a really big house, or this one complex with one master meter. At the end of the day, it's supposed to be fairness. Everybody gets treated equally. GPA said they charge the rate without regard to how much it costs. GPA says if they charge the rate without regard to how much it costs, they lose money. It would likely impact other consumer rates. The issue has come up before, and PUC attorney Fred Harecki said the commission should be the one to resolve it. If somebody asks us to look at that rate, we set up a docket, assign a docket number, and as I have said, consultants review it, and that's the way normally rates are changed. GPA has certain costs that have to be met by rates. If you take away rates in one area, I heard that there are maybe 600 people are affected. So the question is, how does that affect GPA's rates? So here's what's really going on with this bill that Tello introduced that makes some really difficult reading even for lawyers. And I mentioned that the bill is pretty amateurish, and here's a telltale sign of an amateurish bill. The bill has 3 sections. The last section reads like this: if any provision of this act or the application to any person or circumstance is found to be invalid or contrary to law, such invalidity shall not affect other provisions or applications of this act and can be given effect without the invalid provision or application. To this end, the provisions of this act are severable. This is the so-called severability clause. So if you have a bill that basically has one operative section, what is there to sever? There is a knee-jerk reaction amongst the folks that draft bills at the legislature who, and I don't know who they are, I think that every bill has to have a severability clause. There occasionally, once in a great while, a severability clause would be warranted. Otherwise, it's just a waste of ink. So, as I said, the bill is not very well drafted. But here's what's going on. Let's take a condominium. Let's use Alapong condominium as an example. This is not a true example, but let's say that when Alapong was built, the developer had a choice. He could put a power meter for each unit in that condominium building. So if you bought a condominium in Alapong, you'd go down to the power authority, you'd sign a bunch of papers, etc., and the power would be turned on for your unit. You would get a bill every month, you'd pay it, etc. That's the way some of the condominiums and apartment buildings were built. Other developers said, nah, it's too expensive. Rather than do that, we'll run electric power to every one of the units. We will have one power meter for the whole building. The bill will come to us, we'll pay the bill, and we will recover the cost of that power from the tenants, owners, whatever. And that's why you occasionally see an ad in the newspaper, apartment for rent, $1,400 a month, power included. Well, what that means is that you're not going to be billed for power because the developer has that one large meter. So this is what Tello's driving at. If a single family unit, and I have to be careful how I describe this, has a power meter, there's something called a lifeline rate. And the lifeline rate for 600 kilowatt hours is about $15. Now, an explanation of what the lifeline rate is. I remember when this came along, a senator, I believe it was Tony Palomo, said, you know, kind of used the Tello-Ptydagui argument. A lot of folks have a hard time making ends meet. They live from payday to payday. So let's have a lifeline rate that could be affordable for folks that don't have a lot of money. So the first 500 kilowatt hours are billed at a much lower rate than the rest of the power consumption that would be chalked up on a meter. So if you have that one large power meter, then obviously, let's say we're talking about a building with 100 units, instead of 100 lifeline rates, there isn't any, because that one meter would be seen as a commercial meter. So I suppose one thing, Power Authority tends to make more money selling power to that 1 meter than it would to 100 meters because of the lifeline rate. Now, I got to add parenthetically, I'm not in favor of this lifeline rate. It's called socializing the rate structure. In other words, patterning the rate structure on the basis of people's ability to pay. I'm sure Prudencio Mano would agree with me when I say we don't need to drift into socialism that way. If there are people in the community who are in such straits that they can't afford to pay for their power, then let's have a social welfare agency that would look out for those folks. Let's not socialize the rate structure so that we spread that cost, you know, that discount over all the other ratepayers. When I pay for electricity, all I want to pay for is electricity. I don't want to pay for some charitable undertaking. If I wanted to donate to charity, I'd find the community chest or something like that. So that's part of the problem. And part of the problem is the way developers put their buildings together. So what Tello was saying in this very convoluted language is this, that if there is a multi-unit building where each unit does not have its own meter, but there's a single meter for the entire building, the Public Utilities Commission should figure out some way of reducing those rates so that the people in those units attached to that single meter are charged less money. I don't know if that's even possible. I don't know enough about the technology. It doesn't seem that it would even be feasible to do that. If you said, well, there are 600 units there, and we'll reduce, or there are 100 units there, so we'll reduce the overall rate by a factor of X times 100, maybe all you're doing is giving the landlord or the association an extra profit. It just doesn't seem feasible. Another complication here is that the Power Authority has to recover the cost of providing a service. And the cost of providing a service depends on a couple of things. One, how much electricity a customer uses. And second, what the peak demand of that customer is going to be. So another example here is that customers that have large refrigeration units have to pay more money for their power than businesses that don't have large refrigeration units, because in order to start a refrigerating unit, it takes a lot of power. Just notice your air conditioner when it's been off and you turn it on, it has a hard time getting started. So this rate structure thing is very complicated. It's not a job for amateurs. It's not a job that you can sit around with your pocket calculator and a well-developed sense of fairness and come up with anything that makes much sense at all. We do have a Consolidated Commission on Utilities that runs the Power Authority and the Water Authority, and I've mentioned many times that the power and water situation now is so much better than it was before the CCU that there's really no comparison at all. They're doing a pretty good job, and like so many other things, the problem with providing electricity on Guam, there are the same two problems that we run into all the time. There aren't very many of us. There are only 160,000 people here. And two, our location. if we're in East Podunk, Iowa, and we have a problem with our generation, we're hooked into a power grid that covers the whole country, and until we get our generation fixed, we can buy power from somebody else. We can't do that here. What we have, the only thing we have is what we can generate ourselves. So I'm going to come back after the 7th inning stretch. Since Jack Haddock has signed up for today, since he's suited up, I'm going to see if he's going to take the field and see what he's going to do.
There's a reason every day a Guam homeowner is getting a solar system installed by Micronesia Renewable Energy. It's because MRE is the most trusted name in solar. With more solar energy solutions than any other solar company on island, homeowners have a choice to go solar for zero money down or take the path to ownership. Whichever way, it keeps our skies blue and your pockets green. And with the most experienced solar technicians and an energy production guarantee, there are no worries. Call 632-2613 for a free consultation. MRE, the smarter choice.
What will Guam be like in 5 or 10 years, and how will that impact job and career opportunities? What will the market look like for HR directors who need to find the right talent for their needs? I'm Jerry Roberts, and at 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, we'll rev up the crystal ball and see what it could be like.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank.
Jack Haddock, center field, racing back. He got tangled up in the ivy growing on the center field wall at Wrigley Field. He missed the ball, but his uniform is really stained with all of the green ivy. So I guess this would be Jack Haddock's Green New Deal.
You made me drop my hot dog, Bob.
Yeah, well, there's always a little excitement when we've got Jack Haddock suited up. I guess he probably feels more comfortable playing for the Chamorro Land Trust Commission team than for the Tall Tales Tigers, but whatever. And that's what he said. He was suited up and ready to play ball. So good going, Jack. Okay, so 7th inning stretch coming back to Tello and the CCU. There are some really troublesome things involved here with Tello's bill. One, as I mentioned, it's poorly drafted. 2, I think it's poorly thought out. 3, it solves what is not really a problem. When you build a building, if you want to have individual billing for each of the units in the building, then you have to undertake the expense of the wiring and the meters for every one of those units. If not, then you're stuck with that single commercial meter. And the way the rate structure goes, there are tables, descriptions, etc., and you wouldn't be able to accomplish what Tello's bill says must be accomplished. That is, in developing the residential rate structure, the authority shall develop a policy and process to reasonably determine and separate out the estimated residential power consumption for the large multifamily accommodation with a master meter and the separate power consumption and utilization for non-residential components of the facility not normally found. And it's, I would hate to be the engineer who was, if this passed, the engineer who was given this assignment, because he would have to do a lot of guessing. And then I don't know if there's a savings involved. I don't know how that saving could possibly accrue to the benefit of the unit owner unless unless you develop something where you send a check every month to the owner to make everything fair. And I talked a little bit about that in another context. So this is not a good, it's not a good idea. It's not well done, and it's scary because one of the things that makes our utility system workable now, much more workable than it was before, is because the legislature doesn't set the rates. For a long time, politicians would run on the platform, vote for me. I will not raise your power rate. Vote for me. I will not raise your water rate. And in the process, the system really turned to ashes. And it was only after the CCU came along and we understood that you can't, that this stuff is not free, that rates were established that would actually allow us to create a workable system and to keep operating that system. So the sure way to turn the clock back to 1999 is to get the legislature involved in setting rates. And that's exactly what this bill does. It's the first step on what would turn into a very slippery slope. The mechanism that we have now is we have the CCU that operates the Power Authority and the Water Authority, and then we have an independent group called the Public Utilities Commission. And the Public Utilities Commission, among other things, sets rates. But when the Public Utilities Commission sets rates, they don't do it on, on the back of an envelope. The Public Utilities Commission employs consultants, and there are companies that work on rate structure, et cetera, and that can do a scientific, accurate job of establishing a rate structure that would work given our demographics, et cetera. And that's what we have, and we got a system that works. So I don't know what caused Tello to do this. Perhaps someone who lives in a condominium somewhere and came and said, hey, this isn't fair. My neighbor's power bill is X dollars a month, and my unit is the same size as his, and I have to pay $20 a month more than that. And the reason is because I don't have my own power meter. Can't you do something about that? So this is the result. So not a good idea, an idea whose time has not come, and a bill that should be tossed into the shucks can. Now, if people are dissatisfied with the rate structure that the Public Utilities Commission has established, then what they do, they could take a page from Mo Atkinson's book. If you don't like it, then write a letter and say, this is what ought to be done. So anyone who doesn't like the rate structure and the way this single meter, multiple meters system is set up, fill out some papers and turn them into the Public Utilities Commission, and they'll probably open a case, and you can go to the Public Utilities Commission, shoot off your mouth, they'll take a look at it, and if there's merit to what you say, there's a possibility that the rate structure would be changed. That's the way things ordinarily work in what we hold out to be a democratic society. But to go to the Public Utilities Commission with some vague comparisons presented in the concept of, oh, this isn't fair, probably isn't going to work very well. You might be just as well off staying home and watching TV. So that's it for Tello versus the Public Utilities Commission. And let's see what's next on my card here. Rory versus Mike Phillips. Rory versus our system of justice. Mary Camacho versus Danny Tydenko. These are all interrelated subjects. And the latest on this is a story that ran in the Post this morning. Governor stands by airport nominee. Governor Lujan Guerrero is standing by Dan Tydenko, her nominee to the AB Wonpat Guam International Airport Authority Board of Directors. Tydinko received strong support from a number of witnesses at his confirmation hearing. However, Tydinko was severely criticized by Bernadette Stern-Mano, the former marketing manager at the Port Authority, who was fired in December of 2012, along with 6 other port employees, which we refer to here as the Commercial Port 7 or the Magnificent 7. Fired following allegations that she falsified a workers' compensation claim. Tydinko was the board chairman at the time. Mano accused Tydinko of unethical conduct. She declared that she never falsified any records and called her termination the biggest political witch hunt in the history of this government. That's a pretty good-sized political witch hunt. Troy Torres, former communications director for then-Governor Eddie Calvo, called Tydinko a corrupt businessman and a devilish politician. So the Troy apocalypse continues. On his Senator Mary Torres was port general manager when Tydinko was board chairman, questioned Tydinko's character and said she emphatically opposed his nomination to the GIA, to the airport board. The senator accused Tydinko of permitting unprofessional and irregular billing practices for the sake of his personal relationship with Port's legal counsel. That would be Mike Phillips. In response to the critical testimony, the governor said she was not familiar with the details of the termination of the 7 port employees, who've collectively been referred to as the Port 7. Having said that, the governor said the employees were heard and the committee has to weigh out what's being said. Let's see, and come out with their vote. Well, of course, there's a story, a PNC news story here, that points out that the 2 port employees' Civil Service Commission cases were sent by the court back to the Civil Service Commission. And we've got, we have, I think, one of the first stories that came out here. This is KUAM. Dan Tydinko appeared before lawmakers today for his confirmation hearing. But before he gave his testimony, Bernadette Mano testified in firm opposition of his confirmation. Mano is one of the 7 port employees who was terminated when Tydinko was serving on the board and when Senator Mary Torres was serving as the port general manager. They lost their jobs after they were found to have allegedly made illegal payments to Mano for her workman's comp claim. Following the termination, Torres resigned. The case has been ongoing for several years in the Civil Service Commission. During the hearing, Mano testified that the case is subject of a federal investigation and implored lawmakers not to confirm Tydinko. Before even considering that request, it's critical that you look at his actions from his previous tenure as the chairman of the Port Authority, and as you judge whether he is worthy of appointment to the airport board. Then I think you should find his actions were not only unethical, but clearly crossed into the criminal as well. Without going into many details, I will confirm that I was contacted during 2018 by federal agents, specifically regarding the alleged illegal actions by Tydinko and others against myself and the port employees that were terminated. The action remains active in their hands. And Mary Torres, in the same article, as critical infrastructure to the island, I know how important it is for us to ensure that we have an airport that operates efficiently. With your vote of confidence, I look forward. This is a quote from Tydinko, I'm sorry. From Mary Torres, I further call into question his integrity and ability to serve on the board as critical as the airport. I have nothing to lose or gain by his confirmation. I simply believe to sit here in silence would not only neglect my duties as a member of the committee, but would act as a great disservice to our people. So, trying to put all this stuff together, here's what happened. In 2012, Bernadette Maino and 6 other port employees were fired, allegedly because Bernadette Maino filed a false workman's comp claim. And a lot of the details were printed in the newspaper at that time. Now, the way the government of Guam works, the only person in an agency that has the ability to fire someone is what's called the appointing authority. The appointing authority is the director of an agency. In the police department, it's the chief of police. Fire department, it's the fire chief, etc. At the commercial port, it would be the general manager. Boards don't fire people. So the way the system works is that if an employee has committed misconduct, has committed misfeasance, malfeasance, or nonfeasance, he has to be given written notice of what it is that he did wrong and the potential penalty, which would be a punishment for that wrongdoing. The employee then has the ability to appear before the appointing authority and tell his side of the story. He can file papers with the appointing authority. He can file affidavits. He can be represented by a lawyer, etc. He can bring all of these things to the attention of, in this case, the director of the commercial port. And then the next step is whatever action the director takes. If the director has given notice that the misconduct could result in termination, after having heard the employee, the director can terminate the employee. And that's exactly what happened at the port. 7 employees went through that process, and each of them was terminated. Now, one of the stories that I read said after those employees were terminated, Mary Torres resigned. So one would think that Mary Torres's resignation, given the context of what she has said, that her resignation may have had some of the dimensions of a protest. But I went back and found out that it wasn't Mary Torres that signed the notice of proposed adverse action. It was the deputy director of the port at the time, Anisha Terlahi. Apparently, Mary Torres was off island. So in the absence of the director, the deputy director takes over, and Anisha Terlahi signed the notice of proposed adverse action. Mary Torres resigned. Joanne Brown was appointed as the acting director. Joanne Brown signed the final notice of adverse action, which was the termination. That's my understanding of what's happened. Once again, the paper's pretty sketchy on some of the really important details, but that's my recollection of the way it all went down. Now, it's interesting that everybody here that we've talked about today somehow ties Dan Tydenko to the termination of the Commercial Port 7. It isn't the chairman of the board that fires people. And while we're talking of, I suppose I should say chairperson of the board, right? Yeah. I'm not going to. If it's a man, it'll be the chairman. If it's a female, it'll be the chairwoman. I might go so far as to refer to the person in charge as the chair. But when I hear chairperson, it sounds like you took a human being and made him into a chair, something that maybe cannibals would do. Anyhow, it's not the chair that does the firing. So how does Danny Tydenko get the blame for the termination of the 7? And Mary Torres and Bernadette Maino both said this guy is not a good guy. He's unethical. He's this, but no particulars. So what's the difference between saying this person shouldn't be confirmed because he's not ethical, between that statement and this person shouldn't be confirmed because I don't like him? There's no difference at all. if he has done things that would cause the legislature to think he shouldn't be confirmed, then you need to tell the legislature what it was that he did. Otherwise, we're just talking about affection and disaffection, and that isn't really a very good way to choose people to run these various agencies. I'm not sticking up for Danny Tynenko. I'm just trying to put some reason into the process, just like this bill, this single meter bill. You know, we have to pay some attention to the process, and we can't be governed by a sort of visceral sense of fairness when we make these important decisions. There has to be some reasoning involved. So from all of the things I've read in the paper, I don't see the reasoning for opposing Dan Tynenko. If there is an improper relationship between Dan and Mike Phillips, then flesh it out for us. Why is it improper? I'm going to have to come back to this tomorrow, I think, because this is a complicated story, and it's an important story, and it needs to be, I think, thoroughly threshed out before we leave it aside. So after as we go into the home stretch, we're going to go back to the features again.
Lent-friendly burgers at Chili's. Indulge in a selection of our famous burgers with a black bean patty. Black bean patties combine beans with onions, parsley, bell peppers, and cilantro. Served with dill pickles and fries. More Lenten entrees include the spicy shrimp tacos, Cajun pasta with shrimp, or grilled ancho salmon. Best of all, each entree is just $15 and comes with a refreshing Coca-Cola, iced tea, or Heineken on draft. Our fresh house salad with an entree for just $15. Chili's 3 for Me Lent menu. Available for a limited time. Chili's. More life happens here.
Looking for a great deal on a new Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, or Ram? Then get to Cars Plus in Mighty now for our spring sales event, like a new Jeep Compass Sport, $166 per paycheck, or a new Chrysler Pacifica LX, $220 per paycheck, or save $8,500 on a new Ram 1500. How about a new Jeep Wrangler Sport, only $274 per paycheck? Low 1.99% financing is available on approved credit. Save thousands during our spring sales event going on now at Cars Plus in Mighty. Cars Plus, driven by you.
Okay, it's the home stretch on Tall Tales. I've got about 7 more minutes to wrap up the show here. I've got a couple of feature articles. One talking about our planet is not fragile, and then the other one about how rough it was for those of us who were born between 1925 and 1955. Well, I fit nicely into that category. So for those of us, it's a miracle that we ever survived. We did crazy things, like we ate cupcakes, white bread, real butter and bacon. We drank Kool-Aid made with real white sugar. And I'm not talking about ideological Kool-Aid either. And we weren't overweight. Why? Because we were always outside playing, that's why. We would leave home in the morning and play all day as long as we were back when the streetlights came on. No one was able to reach us all day. Kids didn't have cell phones back in the day. And we were okay. We would spend hours building our go-karts out of scraps and then ride them downhill, only to find out that we forgot about brakes. After running into the bushes a few times, we learned to solve the problem. We did not have PlayStations, Nintendo, and Xboxes. There were no video games, no 150 channels on cable, no video movies or DVDs, no surround sound or CDs, no cell phones, no personal computers, no internet, no chat room. We had friends. We met outside and found them. I tell you, those were the good old days. TV. I remember when TV first came along in Elkhorn, Wisconsin. It was either 1949 or 1950, and we'd heard about it, We knew that they had television in Milwaukee and Chicago, but the first anybody in Elkhorn saw of television was that there was a 10-inch TV set in the show window of Breber's Music Shop. And in those days, you had to have an antenna that was about 70 feet tall to pull in a station from Chicago or Milwaukee. So you could go down to Breber's Music Shop during the time the TV was on, which wasn't all the time, and there'd be a crowd of people standing around gee-gawing at that TV set. That's how primitive things were back then. It's a miracle that any of us born in the 1930s ever survived. We fell out of trees, got cut, broke bones, and lost teeth, and there were no lawsuits from those accidents. We would get spankings with wooden spoons, switches, ping pong paddles, or just a bare hand, and no one would call child services to report abuse. It's probably someone will report me to CPS just for reading this on the air now. We ate worms and mud pies made from dirt, and the worms did not live in us forever. We were given BB guns for our 10th birthday, 22 rifles for our 12s, rode horses, made up games with sticks and tennis balls, and although we were told it would happen, we did not put out very many eyes. Well, I'll come back to this tomorrow, but those were the bad old days, you know, and we didn't have all the modern conveniences that we have right now. It's a miracle that anybody ever survived. The other feature that I've spent a little time on here comes from an article in the Lou Rockwell website. Our planet is not fragile. Now, the left would have you believe that because we've been putting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, the world will very shortly come to an end because of what they started calling global warming, which they've backed off and now call climate change. And the official Tall Tales position on climate change is, yes, the climate of the Earth is changing. Yes, the climate of the Earth has always been changing. If you look at historically, the climate has changed as long as there's been an Earth, and it's going to continue. And the position of Tall Tales is that even if everybody junked their cars today and started driving Priuses, it wouldn't make any difference. What will happen to the climate will still happen. And I clicked off a couple of cataclysmic events, like a couple of volcanic eruptions in Indonesia, Tambora and Krakatoa, and a summary here. If you took some of these eruptions, Indonesia in 1883, Alaska 1812, and Iceland 1947, those volcanic eruptions spewed more carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere than all of mankind's activities during our entire history. So just one more of the myths that the left would present to us to gain a bigger government with more control over our lives. So I'll continue these two feature stories tomorrow. As always, it's been great talking to you. We'll see you tomorrow.